Hey guys, it's Matt here, and welcome back to Commander Adventures. Before we hop into today's game, I want to take care of a couple of clerical things. First things first, the channel's growing, and we're excited to have you guys along for the ride as it does. Also, I want to give a quick shout out to the amazing new logo made by Georgios. It's pretty much perfect, so thank you very much. In order to communicate more, we've set up both a Twitter and a Facebook page, which you can find here and here respectively. And as a final heads up, I want to let you guys know that we'll officially be moving gameplay videos to Saturdays to fit our schedules a little bit better, and hopefully give me a little more time to edit some other things we're working on. We have an extremely strange game, which starts off with a bit of an unorthodox play. We have Michael setting the world ablaze with Neheb the Eternal, which is a deck looking to disrupt the game as much as possible, while burning his way to the finish. Grayson is putting the focus back on the land with Lord Windgrace, a deck which seeks to generate value off of landfalls and land cards. We then have George, willing to sacrifice it all alongside Korvold, Fae-Cursed King. This deck typically generates value off of sacrificing permanents, and finishes off with an infinite combo, but George's build focuses a bit more on beating face with Korvold. Finally, we have RJ, looking to escape from the underworld before Elspeth, alongside Athreos, God of Passage. His deck focuses on constantly recasting and killing his own creatures. Michael starts us off. He drops a mountain for turn, and says 5 words that anyone who's ever played him before loves to hear.
Do you like your hands?
As everyone goes to wheel, we'll be right back. Grayson drops a swamp for turn, and as George goes, he drops a forest. RJ didn't draw a land in his new hand, so he discards down and passes. Michael drops a second mountain and passes turn. Grayson drops a Rupture Spire and pays to keep it with his swamp. George drops a Ghost Quarter. RJ top decks a Plains and passes. Michael drops another mountain. Grayson drops a Golgari Rot Farm and bounces the swamp back to hand. He discards down and passes again. George only had 2 lands, so he discards down and passes as well. RJ doesn't hit a land and does the same. Michael drops another mountain and follows it up with a Thematic Compass. Grayson drops a Field of the Dead and then taps out to cast a Crucible of Worlds. George drops a Forbidden Orchard and tries to get RJ's spirits up as he casts a Kadama's Reach. Michael's ready with a Reverberate, and Reverberate becomes a copy of Kadama's Reach. Michael grabs a pair of mountains, and George grabs a swamp tapped and a mountain to hand. RJ misses a land again and passes. Michael drops a Hanwar Battlements. He casts a Koth of the Hammer, and down ticks him, adding 5 red mana. He follows up with a Heartless Hidetsugu, and gives him haste with the Battlements. He activates Heartless, and each player loses half their life. Grayson drops a swamp. He then casts a Harrow, choosing to sacrifice the swamp he just played and bringing in a mountain and a forest untapped. George drops a mountain and passes. RJ casts Swords to Plowshare on Heartless, and George decides Michael could use a little more hate and Beast Within's his Koth of the Hammer. Michael gets a 3/3 Beast, but George shows Michael the dangers of becoming archenemy so quickly as he Ghost Quarters his Handwear Battlements. As RJ ends his turn, Michael goes to grab an untapped mountain. Michael untaps. He drops a mountain and casts a Past in Flames. He recast Winds of Change.
Do you like your hands?
And we'll be right back. Michael follows up with a Robber of the Rich. He remembers his life gain from swords, and then moves to combat and hits George for 3. At end step, his compass flips into the Spires of Orzica. Grayson uses Crucible to drop a swamp for turn, and he casts a Golgari Signet. He follows it up by casting Death Sprout on Michael's Robber. Grayson grabs a tapped swamp and creates a zombie from Field of the Dead as it enters. At his end step, George reminds RJ they're kindred spirits with Forbidden Orchard. George drops a forest. He lets RJ know he still stands a ghost of a chance as he casts a Nature's Lore. He brings in an untapped Cinderglade, and then pulls what we call a pro move by casting a Regrowth to return and immediately replay Nature's Lore. He brings in a tapped Overgrown 2 and passes. RJ plays a swamp as a second land, and casts a Night's Whisper. He draws 2, loses 2, and then discards down at end step. Michael casts a Gilded Lotus in main 1. He then uses it to cast an Extraplanar Lens, and exiles one of his snow-covered mountains with Imprint. Since all snow-covered mountains now tap for 2, he uses his remaining 3 lands to cast Neheb. Grayson casts Lord Windgrace. He upticks him, and discards a mountain to draw 2. He then drops a tapped Savage Land, which creates another zombie. He finishes up by casting a Soul Ring. George drops a forest. He casts a Rhythm of the Wild, and shows RJ the Spirit of Human Kindness as he casts Korvold. He sacrifices a forest as Korvold enters, putting a +1/+1 counter on him and drawing a card, and then gives him haste with the Riot trigger. He then moves to combat, and sacrifices a mountain to hit Michael for 6 commander damage, while gaining another counter and a draw. RJ drops a swamp, and spends a mana to reanimate the Sidisi he discarded last turn. He loses 5 life from Reanimate, and then exploits one of the many spirits George has given him and goes to grab a card. He then casts a Skull Clamp, and clamps a spirit to draw 2 more. Michael is getting dangerously close to top deck mode. He casts an Outpost Siege naming Cons. He then moves to combat and swings out at George. In response to attacks, Grayson putrefies Neheb. George then takes 3 damage from the unblocked Beast token. Michael recasts Neheb in main 2, and passes turn. Grayson upticks Windgrace, and discards a mountain to draw 2. He drops a forest, and creates another zombie. He then casts a Loyal Subordinate. He follows up with a Moldgraph Monstrosity, and as he passes through combat, each opponent loses 3 life to Loyal Subordinate. George drops a mountain. He casts a Xenagod, and then the table starts to worry a bit. RJ then gets a spirit, as I run out of spirit puns, and George reinforces the table's fears by enchanting Korvold with Pheresis. As George moves to combat, Michael emphatically reminds him about Spires of Orzica. George gives Korvold Xenagod's trigger, effectively doubling his power and toughness, and sacrifices Rhythm of the Wild to swing Korvold at Michael. Although Michael untaps and removes him from combat with Spires, George actually walks away the victor, gaining a +1/+1 counter and a draw from Korvold's attack trigger. RJ drops a Plains. He casts a Kaya's Wrath in main 1. The board is wiped. And RJ gains a total of 4 life. Grayson then exiles Maulgraf Monstrosity to randomly return the only 2 creatures in his graveyard, Loyal Subordinate and Centaur Vinecrasher. Vinecrasher enters with 6 +1/+1 counters, and RJ passes. Michael untaps, and exiles a Chandra Torch of Defiance with Outpost Siege. He drops a mountain, and then casts her. He downticks Chandra and removes the Loyal Subordinates. He then recasts Neheb and passes turn. Grayson drops a mountain thanks to Crucible and creates another zombie. He then casts a Moonlight Bargain. He looks at the top 5 of his library and takes 2 to keep a card, while banning the rest. He casts an Avenger's Zendikar and creates a total of 10 0/1 plants. He upticks Windgrace and discards a Death Reap ritual to draw 1. He swings Centaur Vinecrasher at Michael, who removes it from combat with Spires. George casts a Clackbridge Troll and gives RJ the 3 goats as it enters. George moves to combat and puts the troll into Michael eliminating range with Xenagos. Then, Clackbridge Troll triggers, and this happens.
Are you gonna sacrifice something?
No. Yeah, bro.
You don't have to.
Yeah, bro.
Only if you swing at me with it.
Well, unfortunately, I have to decide before
I
this
know.
Before that, it's up to you.
You can all take it.
You can pass for her.
Yeah, bro.
I want an entire box of biscuits.
Okay.
I want literally like 6. And you're gonna shake on it.
Oh my god, they just.
So you're gonna sack a goat? Alright.
After the biscuit deal, RJ sacrifices a goat and the troll is tapped down, causing George to draw and then gain 3 life. RJ drops a swamp and follows it up with a Dictate of Erebos. At his end step, George abrupt decays Michael's extraplanar lens. Michael untaps and exiles Flamekin Village with Outpost Siege. He upticks Chandra and exiles a Treasonous Ogre. He casts the Ogre and follows it up with a Flame Rift, hitting everyone for 4. He then moves to combat and hits George for 4 with Neheb. As he moves to his second main phase, Neheb creates a total of 16 mana. Michael then casts a Comet Storm, kicked 3 times, and has just enough mana to eliminate everyone. Game review. In an attempt to keep these reviews more focused, I'm just going to zero in on key plays. And well, who would have ever thought that Popeye's biscuits would determine the outcome of a game? Although Michael could have sacrificed Neheb, or blocked with him to deal with the troll, the loss in resources and tempo would have most likely prevented him from ending the game when he did. Michael did do an excellent job on disruption throughout the game, and had just enough draw engines there at the very end to keep himself out of top deck mode, and pull away with a win. As always, I want to give a huge thank you to all the players for being a part of this game. George is actually moving away after this recording session, so after we upload the last couple of videos we have with him, he'll be gone from the channel in terms of appearances. I just want to give him an enormous thanks for all the help he's given us throughout the start of this channel. As always, I want to thank Dungeon Games for allowing us to record, and to remind you to meet up with us on Tuesdays or Saturdays when we record if you're interested in being a part of these videos. We'd greatly appreciate a like and a comment, and as always, make sure to subscribe to see more of our Commander content. We've got a very interesting match coming up next week, and I look forward to seeing you then. And of course, thank you all for watching.